Well, here we go. Hi, folks. I'm Nikki Kaufman. I'm the Director of Events at Parnassus. We're delighted to share tonight's event featuring author Chasten Buttigieg with you. During the event, we'll be taking audience questions, which you can ask via the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen, and Chasten will answer questions, as many as he can during the course of the event. Tonight, Chasten will be joined in conversation by Brad Paisley. It gives me great pleasure to turn it over to Chasten and Brad.
Hi there.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going?
How are you tonight?
It's great. I love that we can just do this. You know, welcome to my kitchen. It looks like I'm in your studio.
Yeah, your kitchen's really nice. Where are you? Michigan or?
Yeah, I'm up in Traverse City, and thank you. I have to clean it every day because I'm on camera every day. So it's the cleanest my kitchen has ever been.
What's that book behind you?
Oh, this thing?
Yeah, what is that?
Have you picked up a copy? It's really good.
I have mine here. Mine's signed, in fact, by the author, who I can't pronounce his name.
That's a rare copy.
No, it's great. Welcome, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be interviewing Chasten tonight about this great book. I found myself reading this, and I think probably a lot of you are saying, what in the world is the connection here? And all you have to do is turn to the chapter entitled "Did You Walk Your Steer Today?" to see why this hillbilly singer is interviewing you. Let me read the back jacket to everybody, because this says it all to me. Chasten Buttigieg was born and raised in Traverse City, Michigan, a thespian, two-time 4-H blue ribboner, and decorated member of the high school bowling team. He received his bachelor's degree in theater and global studies from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and his master's in education from DePaul University. He has worked as a busboy, a dog walker, a nursing assistant, a waiter, a cashier at Toys R Us, which speaks to me, a bartender, and most recently, a middle school drama and humanities teacher. He lives in South Bend, Indiana with his husband, Peter, and their 2 rescue dogs. This is his first book. So, as we get into talking about you, this book, who you are, I found as I read it that our similarities are there. It's a similar sort of upbringing, you and I. It's a pretty crazy thing that we come from similar towns. We come from similar people. We have, so many of the same interests in music, so many of the same interests in terms of, pastime. Of course, our paths diverge at some point pretty radically. I looked through this book as I was sort of trying to figure out what to ask you. And one of the first things that came to mind was that growing up, you had this love of country music and things that you felt like you didn't belong in. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah. And, I'm sure we'll get into the meat and potatoes of that later, but country music, shaped me. And I still, when I'm cleaning house, I turn to old country albums my mom would blast on the radio as we were, dusting cabinets and washing windows. I grew up on Dolly Parton, and it's interesting to listen to some country now and think back to the kid that I was and the messages I was receiving from some of those songs. Some of them empowered me. They made me feel like I knew who I was. They made me feel stronger. They made me feel very patriotic. And then other country songs made me feel very confused, very broken in a way. I grew up, in a small conservative town, and at the time was fairly conservative, but I was also growing up in very conservative bubbles. And so a lot of those bubbles were fueled by country music. And so it's interesting to kind of see who I am today and then look back at some of those pictures. When you and I were talking a while ago about having this event, I was going through old photos for the book, and I found a photo of myself in middle school at one of your shows.
Which makes me feel old.
Well, I'm sorry. You were just getting started.
Well, you talk about the bubble, and one of the lines I love in the book is you quote, leaving the bubble to examine it from the outside. And that was talking about really when you did a year in Germany.
Yeah.
Right after, I guess was that high school or college? That was college, right?
It was my senior year of high school.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you left and went over there and lived sort of as an exchange student, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, my song Southern Comfort Zone is kind of about that idea that you totally leave the place you're most comfortable to understand it. And it's not really till you do, I think, that you fully start to look back at, and you see the good and the bad and the things that that, you know, made you who you were. And, you know, for me, it's like country music, as we talk about how that applies to you. You know, I think back to the songs that I was doing back then. Like when you would have seen me in middle school, what year would that have been?
Oh man. 2002.
Right. So I was very young.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very young.
Very, very young. No, right. You know, and I think about that, and I think there's a common misconception with country music is that, you know, is that it's sort of, because it is so focused on lifestyle that it sort of alienates people, but that's at least not my intent. And you know, from your perspective, you talk a lot about when you came back from Germany, and you talk about how it was then that you decided that you were going to, you know, be honest with your parents about who you were. And one of the most, I think, impactful chapters is called Running, Part 1. And it's where you decide you're going to leave, and that you're not going to be welcome. And they're sort of saying, no, you're welcome here. And you've come out and you decide to leave, and they're basically saying, seriously, stay. And you're like, no, I know I'm not welcome. Meanwhile, they were saying you were. Yeah.
So we've got, and we don't want to give away everything in the book, but leading up to that moment, right? Like you mentioned, I'm a 4-H kid. I'm on the bowling team. I'm in theater. I'm trying to figure out who I am and where I fit in. I have 2 brothers who are very different than me, play every sport imaginable. You know, I'm on the drama team and the bowling team. And meanwhile, I'm constantly sort of absorbing all of this messaging that tells me, like, you have to be a very specific type of person to survive here. Not only the lessons, right, that I was learning from country music, but just, you know, going to the county fair, you know, going to the rural high school. A lot of the things that, or the spaces I was operating in, were just telling me that something about you is broken. Something about you is very different. And then come middle school, I start realizing, oh, one of the things about me that makes me quite different than many of the people around me is the fact that I'm gay, but I can't say it out loud. And then Germany is my ticket out. I find out about this scholarship program through my high school German teacher. I forge my dad's signature on the application. I get a call to do the interview. Eventually, my parents get the call that I'm accepted into the program. I break their hearts, right? They've created this very cozy, comfortable nest for me at home. But I run, and it's my way of just getting out. And that ticket was Germany. And then when I go to Germany, I am not in these spaces where I'm weird because I'm queer, or I'm weird because, you know, I'm a country boy. I'm just different because I'm an American.
Right.
And it gave me the opportunity to sort of figure out exactly who I was. And I eventually realized that I am gay and I want to come out. And when I go home, you're right. My parents never said, I didn't sit my parents down and say I'm gay. And then they said, get the hell out. No son of mine is gay. Like many of the horror stories that we hear, right? Parents say, pack your bags, get out of here. It was everything that I had learned up until that moment, that if I come out, I will break my parents' heart. If I come out, I will be a disgrace to my church. If I come out, I will be living a life that will be made harder by the government under which I live. And the thing that I was most afraid of was the shame, not only that I would feel about myself, but that my parents would feel about having a gay son. And so it wasn't because I felt like they wouldn't love me necessarily. It's because I also felt like I didn't want to make them love me. Because that might bring them shame from their community, from their church, from their friends who I know. I don't think my parents would ever say this to me, and they're probably watching right now. I don't think my parents would have ever said to me when I came out, and they probably still wouldn't to this day, but I know they had really hard conversations with friends, who held very different views from them. And at the time, nobody knew what it was like to be gay here. I had no role models. The only thing I knew about being gay was, Ellen DeGeneres on TV, and Will and Grace.
Right. Yeah. We talked about how we had sort of similar upbringings. I'm from this little town in West Virginia, 1,200 people. I only encountered one person who was out and that wasn't until college. And that was a voice instructor that I would go to. And it was fascinating to me because I just didn't, that was a different time. And, in your case, it's a really essential thing to read some of this when you talk about your perspective. It is such an interesting thing. I mean, you're a self-described farmer, actor, nerd. Not the things you typically think of in a cocktail.
No.
Same with like, you talk about your family and there's one of the great, I just love your perspective it's just so unique as far as being from this rural America place and then leaving. And you talk about one of my favorite lines. I want to read a few of them is what we don't have much of in Northern Michigan is public nudity is a line from when you go to Germany. Your first few minutes with your family, you're one of the families you stayed with over there, they stripped down naked and got in a pond, right?
Yeah. So Germany just shatters my world. Right. And the thing you and I have talked about before is some people never leave the bubbles in which they grew up in. Right. Some people never turn around and examine the world that they've been operating in.
Right.
And so I already know when I'm going to Germany, like I don't fit in. I am very weird. This isn't a space for me. Not only am I suppressing who I truly am, but I also just feel like, when I go to the county fair to show my steer, like I'm an imposter, right? In the classroom, I'm an imposter. In my family, I'm an imposter. I feel like an imposter in my church. Like I just don't feel like this is the space that I was supposed to be in. And then I go to Germany and within hours, I get off the train and my host family takes me to their cabin and they're like, oh, well, let's go for a swim. It's a hot summer day. They all strip naked. They, jump in the lake, they swim around and get out.
Buck naked.
Oh yeah.
And you're like,
was like, oh wow, this is going to be a weird year. Yeah.
Right.
They're like, all right, let's towel off and now let's have lunch. It was like, what have I gotten myself into? But at the same time, like I would never, at that time, right? I was like, I got to go get my swimsuit from the suitcase in the car.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm thinking like, this is amazing. Like I've stepped into this another planet.
Yeah. It's
where, they're not I'm looking at them thinking like, that's really weird. And they're not looking at me being like, who is this really weird person sent to us from America?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have survived it. That's amazing. You talk about also the you come from this place where you've won multiple 4-H blue ribbons and you've got the trophy with the bull on it.
Proudly.
Christy writes a question, and I think this is one of my favorite questions so far we've gotten, but in chapter 2, you make the comment, Don't get me started on the horse people. What about us horse people? She writes. I showed my 4-H horses for 9 years at the county fair. She sounds mad. So you want to explain?
Maybe she already knows.
She
Or
might.
no, it could just be a thing at our fair, but I felt like there was this massive separation between like the kids who showed livestock and the kids who showed horses. There was also often what felt like a huge class difference between the kids who could afford to show horses and the kids who were, showing a steer to sell the steer to save money for college. Now, I do not want to make assumptions about all horse people.
Right.
At our fair, there was also this pulling where like I felt like I wanted to hang out with the horse people. And that was my like suppressed like classism.
Right.
That like I was starting to realize like there was a class difference there. But there also just seemed to be like I would walk past, and this is like no malice to my parents. I would walk past these kids like brushing their horses, and like they'd be surrounded by friends, they'd be surrounded by family. Not to say mine never did that. And I would just see this like, I don't know, this very different 4-H world. I can't quite put the words to it. But then there were also like just the jerk horse kids who would like make fun of you for showing a steer. Right?
In my mind, I always imagine horses feel that way about steer.
The horses were jerks themselves.
They are. So we've got another question. This is pretty good. Denise looks forward to reading your book, but if you had to name your 3 favorite books, what would they be?
Oh my gosh. That's really hard. So I didn't read a ton growing up because I felt like it made me weird and a nerd. I was supposed to be outside.
I think you were a nerd anyway. You were totally a nerd already.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, when I discovered the Harry Potter series, and we don't even have to get into like J.K. Rowling's wackiness. Like it was the first time I saw someone in a book that made me think that could be me. Like the kid living in the cupboard under the stairs, like gets whisked off to a magical world, like doesn't feel like a freak anymore, makes friends. Like I was struggling to make friends in school. Like Harry Potter was just, I was like, my mom would like come in, tell me to go to bed. It was that classic scene, right? And then I'd like turn the flashlight on under the covers again, like keep reading Harry Potter because I was just so, engrossed in it.
It's in the book too. You mentioned that you're sitting there reading Harry Potter. I forget what's happening at that point. Your brothers are doing something. And you're just
my brothers were practically starting a forest fire. So my brother had stepped on a ground's nest and decided he was going to go back and set it on fire.
Yeah, right.
And then the fire gets a little too big. And so my dad has to go save the day. And I'm just like hanging out in a lawn chair reading Harry Potter. It's hard. It's hard for me to think in superlatives. Like what are my 3 favorite books? But I'll have to keep thinking about it.
That's fine. As we talk also about some of these things in here, we don't want to give everything away in the book. It's fascinating. It's also somebody who's read the book writes about Pete buying you your first suit.
Yeah.
How did you find it in you to be so brave with, coming out to your family and all the courage? And that's in there. I mean, as you read this, it's pretty apparent to me that was like a slow motion thing where it was like you were who you were and you were headed towards a certain destination, and it wasn't like at some point it just got unbearable. Am I right?
Yeah. So coming out is different for everyone. And this was actually something that was really hard to watch on the campaign trail.
Right.
Because some, journalists would imply that because Pete waited until later in life, he had, I don't know, somehow betrayed himself or betrayed his community or was a liar or, there were so many different things thrown at him based on that decision. And for me, it felt like something that was eating me from the inside. And unless I could name it, unless I could say it out loud, it was literally going to be the thing that killed me.
Yeah.
And as I write about in the book, you know, I had a lot of suicidal thoughts as a teenager because I did not want to disappoint anybody. And I felt like that was the easiest way out. And it got to the point where I felt like if I couldn't name it, if I couldn't say it out loud, even if I lost everything, then I was going to have to take that route. And so I had, because it felt like I was unleashing the monster. Like if I could just get it out, then I could find some freedom in that, some peace in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for my husband, it was very different. He felt the same way, but he thought if he was going to succeed in the things that he wanted to do, that he had to go further into the closet. And like many other queer people, especially older queer people, they suppress their sexuality and they climb the ladder and they get the jobs and sometimes the families, and they do everything they can to impress everybody else and sacrifice love and community and acceptance for who they truly are to achieve other things. And you know, and Pete and I have had so many heart-to-hearts about that, about how our paths just took us in such different ways, and then ultimately they met one day, right? And how miraculous that is.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, as I read through also just the little analogies of your lives and the things that you did pathwise, I've not met many people who have, I guess, worked for the amount of diverse types of jobs that you have. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable list, and some are left out on the book jacket. I mean, there's, you know, like Toys R Us. I wrote down some of my favorite lines that you say about some of these things in the book.
Oh, no.
They don't need explanation because I think people should read to understand them. One of your quotes about working at Toys R Us, which to me, Toys R Us is like, rest in peace. I miss that more than anything we've lost in the last few years. I mean, I used to be at Christmas time. I was a perennial. I was just there. I was like every other day, I'd think of something else that the kids needed or a little piece or something. I loved that store. One of those people that probably would have annoyed you if you were still there.
Probably. I hated that job.
You had a line it's would you like to sign up for a 2-year warranty for your light up piece of bullshit? That's in the book.
Yeah.
Read to find out what he means. A bartender, Felicia, drag queen, taught you how to make a Cosmo, which you are a good bartender. I've seen it. You're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a great job. It was a hard job, but that seems like lifetimes ago.
Bartending is an underappreciated thing. That's an amazing profession. When somebody's great at it, it's really, it's, you know, okay. Another, as you worked at Starbucks, you talk about, which I totally I was ahead of my time on this. I had the song Celebrity, which talks about throwing a fit when your latte isn't just how you like it. And you saw
You're
this
part of the problem, Brad.
I'm part of the problem. I understand, but you saw this firsthand from people. Yeah. They would come in and like one of the quotes from this section that I think is amazing is, I think it was the girl working the counter, or maybe it was the drive-through window that yells, "Bitch, I have a PhD."
Yeah. And she took her headset off and she walked right off the job.
Yeah, quit and said, right.
She just quit right then and there. Yeah.
And
I feel like, is it the universe or is it people? Because almost every time I go to Starbucks, someone's being awful to a barista.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Maybe God put me on this earth just to tell people where to shove it when they're being rude to a barista. But
I would agree.
Be kind to the people who are handling your food in the first place.
Well, yeah.
And I don't get, you know, and I write in the book, like, people, life sucks for a lot of people, right? And like you go to Starbucks and you want your like $5 sugary treat because it is like the highlight of your day and it just makes everything better just for a little bit. And so if the person on the receiving end of, you know, that like hasn't done it just perfectly, so many people feel so entitled to make that person feel like crap. And I don't understand that.
Yeah.
And I used to work with a barista who, when people were so rude to him, he would just push the decaf button instead of the regular button.
See, that's fair. I think that's fair. It's better than spitting in it.
I think so. People should really consider, is it worth treating this person like garbage because I didn't get enough caramel drizzle on my Frappuccino?
I don't.
No, the answer is always no.
I'm with you. Well, and it's inspiring too when you think about these things that you did, getting to now where you're becoming a household name. You're becoming somebody people know. I mean, we have people watching you right now in Nashville, Tennessee that would have never known who you are. And you've come a long way from this. You talk about your dad had told you that peanut butter is sort of everything's okay if you have a can of Jif in the cupboard.
Yeah.
Right?
There's probably 3 jars of Jif in that pantry back
Will
there.
you show us the Jif tattoo today? This is how
I
much
have to take the shirt off and everything.
No, never mind then. Okay. We don't want that. We're not in Germany here.
But that's how, that my dad, and I love that I got an opportunity to share just a little bit of my dad's story. And I hope I get to write another book in the future because his story, and both of my parents are such inspiring people. My dad emancipated himself when he was in high school, left home, bought his first home at 17 or 18, I believe. At one point, his motorcycle breaks down and he walks to high school, and then he walks to the diner where he's flipping burgers afterwards, and then he walks home from the diner. Doesn't have a lot of money. My mom, a little bit more comfortable, waiting tables, uses her, waitressing money to buy my dad a winter coat when he doesn't have one. I mean, their love story is so beautiful. They're high school sweethearts, still married, still living in the same home we all grew up in. And, they had 3 boys to feed, and we ate a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. And, my dad was pretty frugal with a lot of things, but he made sure that my mom always bought Jif peanut butter because that was a luxury that we could afford.
Right.
And he used to say, you got Jif, you got nothing to complain about.
Yeah. And it led you. So you have 2 tattoos, and one of them is the logo from Jif on your arm.
Yeah, it's right here.
Right there. And then the other is for your mom. And what was that?
That's an infinity symbol. So I got that when I was 18, a year after she was diagnosed with cancer.
See, that's one of the things I found really inspiring in the book is that I knew you'd had a difficult path, but the fact that you have so much respect, and it's so inspiring to me, this journey you're on with your parents.
Yeah.
Again, you have them represented on your own body, and you have, and it's like, I was really interested in how they're portrayed in the book, and it's really inspiring and loving. And I think it should be hopeful to people that read it that are going through anything similar, because it feels like when you look back now, as I read this, I'm struck with the notion that, you wound up in a good place overall after much struggle. Would you say that's right?
Yeah. And the fact that happened is a miracle.
Right.
Most queer people don't get that happy ending. Most, we met people on the campaign trail who hadn't talked to their family in 50 years. We met older gay couples who the sheer presence of Peter and I was enough to move them to tears, that they had never imagined in their lifetime his campaign would be possible. We met very young people, 16, 17, 18 years old, who were kicked out of their homes. Now they're in foster care, or folks who had just aged out of foster care, who are now trying to find housing and find employment. Young trans women who have aged out of the foster care system, who are being discriminated against in housing and employment. People who were dealt such a shittier hand than mine.
Right.
And the fact that I got to go home, and then the fact that I got to go home to a family that was willing to have really hard conversations. And we are so lucky, and I hope people find hope in that story, because I would not be here had it not been for them.
Yeah.
I mean, the friends along the way who helped me, who made space for me when I did run away from home. And then, a family who they had no idea what it meant to be gay. They,
right.
they didn't have any of the answers. And all that they knew was that it was going to be really hard.
Right.
But that they also told me they loved me. And, you know, when we'd have these conversations and they would say something that was homophobic that they didn't know, I could say, oh, that really hurts my feelings, or like, here's how I see it, or here's what's actually going on. And they'd apologize. They say, oh, my intention was never to hurt you. I just want to know. I just want to learn. And that's the thing. Like, right now, we are so quick to cancel people. We're so quick to push people away. And everyone, I feel like a lot of people, especially on social media, operate in absolutes. You're either a good person or a bad person.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're not willing to take a chance on people and have the hard conversations, you know, what you'll just keep moving yourself closer and closer, you know, into a more comfortable echo chamber. But that's not how I operate. And that's not how my life worked out. Right. I mean, we have this home in Michigan. I'm not willing to give up on my hometown. I'm not willing to give up on, you know, my family, at least my family who see me as an equal human being, you know, and we just can't afford to give up, especially on the people that we love. Right. You and I were talking about getting out of the bubble. A lot of the people living here have never left here, and they've never had to have some of these conversations.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, I have a family who's willing to do that is a miracle. That's why I spent so much time on the trail speaking with LGBTQ youth and touring centers and, you know, visiting with homeless service providers, because I felt like, you know, I have this immense privilege, and I want to make sure that I use that to tell other people's stories and to take those stories to Washington, you know, with their stories in mind, to hopefully do something good with it.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think you're totally doing good work that way. And, you know, Elizabeth writes, who inspires you? And because you're very inspirational. And I think you're just starting out on this inspirational path. I mean, these things are new. Like this was all basically in the last year that you have become someone anyone really knows. And I think you've done a lot already, but who is it that you look up to in terms of who makes you hopeful during these uncertain times, she writes? Who do you look up to?
So, you know, before the campaign trail, I feel like my answer to that question would be my parents. I mean, you got to read the book just for that.
Yeah.
They're such loving people, such strong people, passionate people, you know, and when, you know, I went from fearing that I would be such a burden and a shame to my mother, to watching my mom walk in pride parades with her, you know, proud mom shirt on, and also like telling anybody, you know, what they can do to themselves if they have something, you know, cross to say about her baby. I mean,
Right.
she's the best ally you can hope for in a parent. Then I went on the campaign trail, still love my mom, still look up to her and still think she's amazing. I think a lot of times we're quick to like name celebrities as, you know, people we look up to, people who inspire us. We read about them a lot. And then I met so many people this last year who truly changed my belief, you know, in that this country, it can be a really dark, terrible place. You know, I met people who are just doing the work every day. You don't get to read about them. They're not on the headlines. I remember this lady in Iowa. She came to this like cookout for Pete. And she told me she was a theater teacher. So we had a lot to connect about. And she was running this after school theater program out of her own pocket, you know, renting this space because there was no arts programming, you know, in rural Iowa where she lived. But what she was also doing was running like an underground LGBTQ center, because a lot of these gay kids had nowhere to go. And this is a woman who has just recognized a need in her community and is not only providing, you know, an outlet for kids to be creative, but also providing a safe space where they feel like it's just okay to exist. And there are people like her all across this country, you know, in communities from coast to coast, who are just doing the work day to day. And I got to meet them every day. And I was always inspired just by these hardworking, loving people who weren't waiting on Washington, who weren't waiting on the government to make it right, who were just going to do it themselves.
Yeah, I bet. You know, seeing the faces of this nation as you travel, and especially in what you were doing, it's definitely never what you expect fully. It's
No.
truly, it really is a very diverse nation. And it's interesting. I've said this to you before, but you and Pete destroy stereotypes. You just destroy them. I mean, in so many ways. And I think destroying stereotypes is good these days.
Well, I think you're on the front lines of that too.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know about that. I in some ways am a stereotype, but in other ways,
well, I mean,
I'm not.
we've all gotten it wrong at times, but you're also a person who's willing to have the conversation.
Oh yeah.
And there are many people, I know growing up in country music, people who think one specific way. And if you do not adhere to that lifestyle, if you do not check every box, then you do not belong. And that's just not how most people work. That's just not how the world operates. And, I just figured, like, I thought growing up there would never be a country artist that would be okay with who I was.
Interesting. That's and that's too bad. But I think you see now that, we there's a lot of us that look, we understand the world is bigger than we ever dreamed. And, one thing that's been fun is getting to know you. And the way that I met you and Pete was at Good Morning America. I was walking through the backstage at Good Morning America, and here comes Pete alone walking down the hall, and I'm walking down the hall, and I'm dressed up to go on and sing. I think this is how I remember it. Tell me if I'm wrong. And here he comes in his starched white shirt, and I'd seen him on TV speaking. I don't think he had declared his candidacy yet. He might have. Was he already running, or it was just speculated?
I can't remember.
Either way, he was walking through. There was early on, and I'd seen him on TV, and I think he'd already given his speech where he was talking about that first unbelievably inspiring speech where he talked about coming out and growing up, and he was walking through, and I said, "Hey," I said, "Wow," I said, "you just seem so smart," and we were talking, and nice to meet you. He's like, "Well, thank you," and as he's walking through, he leaves. And then he comes to you, I think, and says, "I just met a guy in a cowboy hat who's really nice." And you're like, and then you looked at the TV, right? And I was singing, and you're like, "Him?"
Yeah.
Like, "Yeah, that's him." And you're like, "You're an idiot." He's celebrity blind, isn't he?
Yeah. He 9 times out of 10, he doesn't know who anybody is. Not a big pop culture person. Which is fine because I'm usually well read on all of that. If we're on a plane, I'll be reading a gossip magazine, and he'll be, either reading some sort of dense policy book or biography of the president or something about international relations or whatever. And I'll be like flipping through a People magazine.
That's
why we love him, though. He's focused on the right things. We don't want our president to be a celebrity. We got one of those right now.
Well, it's like with him, the thing that I found with getting to know you guys is just the again, you guys just shatter stereotypes left and right. I mean, and also I think that there's to me as a country singer, as we talk about how you were wondering if there would ever be if country singers would be okay with you as you, and look, country music is reflective. I feel like it's the type of music that really does look at the world and try to reflect it, and as the world changes, so will it. It's not always
so.
I think it will, because the thing is, there's avant-garde, and maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, it's like there's these avant-garde types of music that really are, whether it's protest music or 60s rock or these things that really tried to lead a movement. Country music was always a little more interested in saying, here's a painting of the current thing, what this is. And, I do have a lot of, as I meet my fans are some of the most wonderful people in the world. And they remind me in so many ways of your mom and dad, and they need a chance. They need a chance to sort of become, I think
if we don't give them a chance, then where do they go?
Yeah. Right.
And
You can't just assume all these things about them either. And it's like they, and that's what's been so much fun is seeing your love for this type of music. You really know your stuff. You do. I mean,
yeah, do you ever think, I'd love to hear like a good gay love country song.
probably not my job, but
Why not? You could write it.
I guess, but it's, again, there's someone will do that. That'll be,
People want to see themselves reflected in everything, right?
well,
And so,
it's interesting. Like Luke Bryan had a couple of lines in a big hit of his recently that were about loving who you love, and Garth's so totally gone down that road a few times with, what was the one that it was not standing outside the fire anyway, but maybe it's that, but he also,
yeah,
we shall be free.
Celebrating differences.
Yeah, we shall be free. Yeah, we're wading in.
Well, I think the important thing is like, one, I just respect that you have a conversation now. And I wonder about like when we paint people into certain boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think if I was a teenager in 7th grade and you told me like, one day you're going to sit down with Brad Paisley and you're going to talk about being gay, I would have called you a fool, right?
Right.
And, I hope that we make space for other people to have these conversations as well. I'm really worried about, obviously I'm very open about my political, beliefs and where I think this country should go. And I'm trying to help other people understand that like Project Lincoln or a sassy tweet or a yard sign is not going to be the thing that saves this election. And if you really want to, convince people, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable or get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to have those conversations. You have to reach out to your neighbor or, that uncle that or that person at work and have that conversation. But you can never do it in a way that, you just approach someone and say, Jim, I think you're a racist, homophobic bigot, and you should vote for Joe Biden. That will shut them down right away.
Right. If you're actually answering one of the questions somebody wrote,
really,
yeah, about, how do you talk to people? And I think that, the day needs to come when this issue is not even a political discussion. That's just one of the tenets. You know what I'm saying?
I would love to see that day. And unfortunately, we still have people in this country who truly believe that, queer people are literally less than.
Right.
That they are not the same type of human, that they are not worthy of equal rights. But I can't approach a conversation with someone and say, you're a homophobe, vote for my candidate. They're gonna be like, screw you. No one's going to listen to you. But if you approach that conversation with empathy,
right,
and say, if you'll hear me out, I'd love to hear you out. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's what I stand to lose. Here's what's on the line for me. Here's how I feel. These are the things that weigh on me day in and day out.
Right.
What do you stand to gain? What do you stand to lose? And don't do it, don't be a jackass. Don't say, well, what do you stand to gain?
Right.
You have to put some earnest ears on and actually hear people out. And I also have to, disclaimer, like when people say things that make you feel like they don't see you as an equal human being, like your dignity, your humanity is never up for debate. So sometimes that conversation is never going to go anywhere.
Right.
If someone literally thinks like you're not an equal human. But there are many people in this country who also have never had to think about it.
Yeah.
Sit in their comfortable bubbles and no one's ever, knocked on their door saying, hey, I really don't want to lose my right to be married to the person that I love.
Well, you think about, your parents and your grandma Wanda, like,
oh my gosh,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I love the stories about her, and it's like, they're a great example of folks who, they would have never had to deal with this issue if you weren't who you are. But they, given the chance, here they are, and it's like your grandma Wanda, one of the great quotes in this book, she just said, I love you for who you are. I love you as you are, and
yeah.
What an amazing sounding woman. And, she said, devout Catholic, you would go to communion with her and she'd lean down and whisper in your ear, hey, keep walking after communion so we can get a good table at Big Boy.
Yeah.
That's just, You know, who would have thought, right?
Yeah, and I thought for sure the day I came out to grandma that it was all over.
Right.
Um,
People will surprise you from time to time. I have hope for that. I've hope that there's more people like your grandma than we think.
but the thing about Wanda that was remarkable that I think she helped other people come around to was that the way she interpreted her religion um, guided her to love me no differently.
Yeah.
And once she found out that I was gay, she fought even harder for me
Wow.
because she truly believed in loving everybody, treating everybody with respect, and that family comes first.
Yeah.
The thought to her, she was actually really offended when I, talked to her that I was so afraid I'd lose her.
Yeah.
That she'd pushed me away. She was so offended because she felt like that's not the Christian woman I am. Like, how could you ever think I'd be that type of person, right? And that's the difference. Some people use their religion to be the thing that gives them permission to discriminate against other people, and then some people like Wanda use it as a license just to love bigger.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to ask our moderator if we need to cover anything else, because she's told us to go 45 and we're well over that. But
oh no, well, man, we really, wow, we just burned through that.
I've loved it. It's great talking to you.
Well, thanks. Hey, I appreciate you sitting down for the conversation, and I appreciate everybody in Nashville or wherever you're tuning in from listening. This book is it's not. I don't think it's your standard political memoir. I did not
Really
want
not.
to. This isn't to serve a purpose other than sharing the power of vulnerability and truth. And I hope it does some good. I hope you see yourself in it, or I hope it brings you closer to people in your life. It's been a scary ride to write it and put it out in the world. But I'm touched if you've already purchased a copy, and I hope if you have the ability, you'll make sure it gets into the hands of somebody who needs it. Well, hopefully that the story of family and love, is like a virtual hug to you. And Brad, thanks so much for having the conversation, man. This has been great. I wish we could keep talking.
I've loved it. And I wish we could have done this the old fashioned way where you come into town and we sit up there at Parnassus and talk about this, but because we haven't been to that bookstore, have you?
I actually think I was when I went through Nashville.
Oh, okay. Well, it is truly, it's a treasure in our town. We're really, really lucky to have it. I would encourage anybody watching, if you're going to buy it from there. And,
yes, please.
And this is a great book. I thank them for letting me do this. I'm trying. Okay. We're going to end on one thing. I need to hear you pronounce, because I couldn't do it, the German word for ice skating.
Oh, Schlittschuhlaufen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's our final word for tonight.
And with that, good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching this. Go check the book out, and good luck with everything.
Thanks,
by the way,
Brad.
New York Times bestselling author, Chasten Buttigieg.
Thanks, man. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.